What's going on, guys? This is Rob. If you guys enjoy my content, make sure you hit the subscribe button and make sure you hit that little bell so you never miss out on my sexy voice. Okay, so I want to be a little bit dangerous here, and I want to ask the question, can Iron Man make Infinity Stones? Well, really anybody in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, can they make Infinity Stones? The reason why I say Iron Man is, I guess, spoilers for a movie that's been out for, almost a month. Everybody who's capable except for Iron Man dies. Like, anybody capable of doing anything. Because there's no Professor X, there's no Doctor Doom, there's no Reed Richards, and Peter Parker's gone. Like, the scientific powerhouse of the MCU is Iron Man. And really always has been, in terms of like science and technology, it's always been that way. If Reed Richards were there in the MCU, I would say, oh, definitely Reed probably could. But, all we have is really Iron Man. I guess it's kind of interesting when you look at it in the greater scope of the characters who are seen in the MCU versus the characters who are available throughout Marvel as a whole. And it's like, man, all they really have is Iron Man? Because there's a ton of people out there. There are like a ton of super geniuses. You have pretty much anybody from AIM. You have Advanced Idea Mechanics. You have pretty much, you got Reed Richards. You have Adam Brashear. You have Black Panther, but he's gone too. But you have Black Panther. I guess maybe Shuri. You know what? Shuri might be able to pull it off because science is so advanced. But okay, here's the thing. All right, let's kind of answer this question. Can Infinity Stones be created? And the answer to that question is actually yes. Infinity Stones can be created. In Marvel Comics, you can make an Infinity Stone to copy the existing Infinity Stones. Now, no one ever does that. I mean, Marvel Comics has never given us a situation like that. And the reason why is, I'd probably say, for a few different reasons. One, because if you do that in the comics, well, then you open the floodgates. If Reed Richards can make Infinity Stones, then why can't Doctor Doom? And why can't Adam Brashear? And why can't Black Panther? And why can't any of these people out there who are super smart? How come they can't do it? And so really it's easier to simply not even open that can of worms in the first place. To basically say the Infinity Stones are just kind of like these objects that are a physical aspect of the universe made tangible. It's easier to say that than anything else. Not only that, if somebody could duplicate and create an Infinity Stone, it would take away from the significance of the Infinity Stones themselves, of the Infinity Gauntlet. Because whenever someone gets a hold of the Infinity Gauntlet in Marvel Comics, it doesn't matter who it is. If it's Iron Man, if it's Parker Robbins, if it's Captain America, it doesn't matter who the person is. If somebody gets a hold of it, then it's like, oh my God, like if we're not careful, we're all screwed. Like, that was the whole thing behind Infinity Gauntlet, right? Like, the Infinity Gauntlet story happens, Thanos gets the gauntlet, goes nuts, and then Nebula gets it from him, and then people are just like, oh my God, she's gonna go crazy. Like we have no idea what she's gonna do. She's not pursuing power, she's just a chick with a broken mind who got a hold of absolute power. And so it gets kind of crazy, kind of hairy in that situation. So, but the funny thing about this is that the Infinity Stones do not manipulate anything that doesn't already exist, right? Like, they just manipulate the fundamental forces of the universe. They, at least that's what the reality stone does. But like the time stone does the same thing. It just manipulates 2 points in time in the history of the universe. The mind stone manipulates thoughts. And that's kind of the funny thing. In Marvel Comics, everything is energy, right? Like everything is energy. And it didn't used to be that way. It used to be that in Marvel, you had two fields. You basically had like two sides of this coin. You had the magical side and the non-magical side. The magical side was really explained in like by Gary Friedrich rather, in 1971 with Tales to Astonish #8. And the idea was, okay, so Doctor Strange can do what he does because he's using the energy of other beings out there, and that energy allows them to manipulate all different kinds of things, And so it's like you want to buy a car, right? Like, there's a $50,000 car out there that you want to buy, but you don't have $50,000. So you go to a bank and borrow it, and then you get that $50,000 car. That's what Doctor Strange does. In and of himself, Stephen Strange is the weakest person ever. And even with all the spells he has, like anybody who knew that Stephen Strange is Doctor Strange himself, they could just snipe him from a rooftop and he's dead. If he can't cast a spell in time, that's the end of him. That's really all it is. Unless, of course, he has an enchantment around himself to make himself bulletproof at all times, which is entirely possible. But like, if the Punisher wanted to kill him, he could just take him out that fast. And that's it. It's the spells he uses from other mystical beings out there that allow him to do the kind of things he does. Now, the other side of the equation is non-magical beings, basically mutants and individuals who have various superpowers. When it comes to like non-magical beings, Marvel never had rules for that. They were just there. Like, not Doctor Strange, Professor Xavier of the X-Men could read minds because that's just what he does. And like Jean Grey could read minds because that's just what she does. There were times when like explanations for characters' abilities basically came into existence as the years went on. For example, Cyclops didn't really have an explanation in terms of how his powers worked. He just removed his ruby quartz glasses, or opened up his optic beams and like, you know, a concussive force just came flying out of his eyes. And that was it. It wasn't until years later that you learned that the eyes of Cyclops are actually portals to a dimension of pure energy. And when he opens his eyes, the portal opens and bam, all that energy comes out. And that's it. You know, we never really got like explanations in the early days of Marvel. Now, again, because of the fact that magic was so weird, even on the magical side, things got a little chaotic. For example, you had Dr. Stephen Strange, who was a Sorcerer Supreme, and then you had Agatha Harkness. And it was like, well, Agatha Harkness is an actual witch. Like she's not a sorcerer. Like she's not a sorceress. She's a witch. But there was no real difference between what Agatha Harkness did and what Doctor Strange did. They basically did the same thing. They just did it by two different means. And because of the fact that Marvel was kind of splitting hairs to basically offer, you know, an explanation of how these two characters differed in relation to non-magical beings who could kind of do the same thing, then suddenly it became really confusing and it became really wild. This was also another situation that really kind of began to give rise when you started seeing characters like the Molecule Man Owen Reese, who could just warp the universe, you know, who could control the very fundamental forces of reality itself, the Beyonder, you know, like Mad Jim Jaspers, like all these crazy reality warping beings. It was nuts the kind of power they possessed. And so Marvel sat down one day and Marvel said, okay, we need to kind of have an explanation that ties all this together. We can't simply just have like magic lets you do things and these things let you do things. And so in Fantastic Four number 500, what Mark Waid did is he basically sort of brought all these things together. And he essentially said, okay, so here's how these things work. And what was basically established here is that everything in the universe is composed of energy, and that's it. When you think something, the thoughts that you have actually resonate to the astral plane. The astral plane had been around for years and years and years and years. It had been around for a long time, ever since the Strange Tales comics in like 1963. It had been around forever, but nobody ever bothered to kind of make the connection to basically say that like there's no real difference between what Doctor Strange does and what like Professor Xavier does. They just do it by two different means. Instead, it was the magical side, the non-magical side, and that was it. But by saying that everything is energy, then in turn it makes things a whole lot simpler, because what you have is exactly what you've always had. Just Doctor Strange manipulating the universe and the Scarlet Witch controlling the universe. Is just who has a greater control over the universe is really all that is. And that really kind of came to a head with Infinity Gauntlet, right? Like back in 91, 92, the Infinity Gauntlet story really shifted things up, because it really kind of took like the powers of Doctor Strange and said, well, you have no power here. Like, sure, there's everything that you can do, but you're helpless in the face of the Infinity Gauntlet. And that's when people started asking questions. Well, if Doctor Strange uses magic and it's a wholly separate set of power than what the Infinity Gauntlet does, then how can the Infinity Gauntlet basically hold sway over Doctor Strange and prevent him from being able to topple it? Couldn't he just cast a spell in order to make sure the Infinity Gauntlet doesn't work or something like that? That's when those themes started to blend together. So here's the way things work in Marvel Comics right now in terms of this moment that we're recording this video, whatever day it is in May 22nd, 2018. I don't know what day we're recording this video, whatever day it is. All right, what you basically have is you have 3 tiers of energy. Now, again, this all comes out of Fantastic Four number 500, right? The first thing you have is personal energy, is the energy of your own body. Now, different people use this in different ways, but it really is just like basic energy manipulation. For example, like Iron Fist uses his own physical energy to create the actual Iron Fist itself. Like that's what Danny Rand does. But then you have Bruce Banner, the Incredible Hulk, who draws on his own energy, which is literally just like drawn off his own actual anger, his emotional state, and that pushes his strength even further. It's a little ad hoc, but it works for the purpose that it serves. You have individuals who can basically make themselves invisible. You have people like Wolverine, who uses his own energy in order to basically heal himself. Now, when it comes down to personal energies, there's only ever really 2 types. There's what's called passive and there's what's called active. Passive energy basically means that it happens whether you want it to or not. Like it's just the way it works. Wolverine's healing factor is a passive energy. It's a passive power. Like his body will heal itself whether he wants it to or not. He can't control his healing factor. It can be taken away, but he can't really control it. But then you have someone like Bishop, who has an active power, meaning that when Bishop is blasted with any kind of physical energy or hit with a physical, hit physically, it transfers energy from, whatever he's been blasted with or whatever the physical force is into the body of Bishop, which he absorbs, and then he can channel it back out into like a physical, into like a actual energy beam or something like that. But it's literally just energy transference is really all that is, but it's still personal. But again, that's just an example. I mean, another really good example and how it ties into the Infinity Stones, when we say personal energy, like telepathy. Like one of the things that people ask about in Marvel Comics is, how does telepathy work? Does Charles Xavier really just read the minds of individuals? Does he jump into their heads. To a degree, he can. I mean, he can do that. But what it is basically energy manipulation on a personal level. In Marvel Comics, when you think a thought, your thought actually radiates out into the astral plane. That's how people like the Shadow King can hold sway over individuals. Literally every single thought that you have of every single day in the Marvel Comics universe radiates out into the astral plane. At the same time, like every time you go to sleep and you dream, your thoughts, your subconscious, dream thoughts, whatever it is, what happens in the subconscious mind radiates out into the dream dimension, which is where the Doctor Strange villain Nightmare resides. Now, the dream dimension was basically created when like the first sentient being had its dream, and then it's just kind of been growing ever since as a result of like all the dreams that all the sentient beings have ever had. It gets pretty metaphysical when you start talking about that kind of stuff, but that's the way it works. Like those are actual things. What someone like Charles Xavier does is he really like intercepts, is what it is. Like Charles Xavier will read your mind and he'll basically intercept your thoughts on the way to the astral plane. Now, if they're like a way in is a way out, basically. And so if there's a way into the astral plane or a way out of your, like if your thoughts make their way out of your mind, somebody can make their way into your mind. And that's what Xavier does. It's almost like swimming against the tide of thoughts into your head and then seeing what it is that you have. He can put thoughts in there, take thoughts out, the whole 9 yards. But all it's doing is just manipulating your mind in terms of how it works with regards to the astral plane. But then from there, you move on to what's called dimensional energy. Now, dimensional energy gets kind of iffy because someone like Doctor Strange doesn't just draw on dimensional energy, but like Cyclops, for example, is dimensional energy. Again, like he opens his eyes, energy from another dimension flows through his eyes and comes out in the form of a concussive force. But like another example is Juggernaut. Like Juggernaut uses what's called the Crimson Gem of Cyttorak. Cyttorak being one of the elder gods that existed on Earth and took off when the Demiurge started killing all the gods, all the elder gods, and then took off into the sun. But basically, like Cyttorak resides in the Crimson Dimension. Now, inside of his own dimension, like Cyttorak is insanely powerful. I would say nigh unstoppable inside of his own dimension. Now, once he leaves, he's like Mephisto, like Marvel's devil, right? Like the longer Mephisto stays away from his own dimension of hell, the weaker he gets. With Cyttorak, it's kind of the same way, but not really. Marvel doesn't really show Cyttorak leaving his own dimension that much. In fact, I don't think it's ever really happened since the Octessence, since like the day 9 event, the 8-day event, the 8th day event, which was like 8th day Juggernaut, where he was just like crazy OP. But nonetheless, like those are the kind of things that go on in terms of that. Like, Cyttorak put a portion of his power into the Crimson Gem. And that's why when K. Marco stumbled upon it, he basically read the inscription, you who read these words shall be bestowed with the crimson power of Cyttorak, yada, yada, yada. You will go forth forevermore a human Juggernaut. And that's kind of how that whole thing works. He picks up the gem and he's imbued with the energy of Cyttorak. Someone like Doctor Strange, again, it gets kind of hairy because almost all of Doctor Strange's powers come from extra-dimensional beings. They come from beings that exist in different dimensions, but outside of the main Marvel universe. So in the main Marvel universe, think of it like your house, right? Like in the main Marvel universe, you have like your living room and like your master bedroom and like your kitchen. You have your common areas, right? Your common areas would be like the universe. And then a closet, like if you open the closet where, like the entry closet where you hang your coat, that would be Asgard. And if you open the closet that leads into the laundry room, that would be like, the dark dimension where, Dormammu lives or something like that. They all exist inside of a singular universe, but you can access them through certain doorways, portals, or what have you. But the fact remains here that when it comes to like, dimensional energy, it's literally just drawing on the energy of another being that exists out there. But again, with someone like Doctor Strange, pretty much all the power he derives comes from another dimension. It comes from like the Vishanti, or it comes from Watum, or it even comes from Cyttorak himself in the form of the Crimson Bands, which you saw in the Infinity War, like when he locks Thanos in those bands. Those are the Crimson Bands of Cyttorak. I mean, those are the kind of things you see. That's why they didn't call them the Crimson Bands of Cyttorak, because Cyttorak is tied into the X-Men mythos. So they can't really use Cyttorak because of the Fox Disney rights. But basically, that's how that whole thing plays out. But he draws a lot of his energy from other dimensions, and so what that does is basically just allow him to use those energies for any one particular purpose. From there, you have like universal energy, and it's basically the energy of the universe is really all it is. Now, when we say the energy of the universe, it's not like the energy of the universe at this point in time. It's the energy of the universe, all energy that has existed, currently exists, and does exist in the future. And that's why individuals like Trevor Fitzroy can jump back and forth through time, is because what he's doing is he's basically manipulating universal energy for the purpose of like jumping around. Now, that's the temporal aspect. The time aspect aspect of universal energy, but he's basically jumping from one point in time in the universe to another point in time in the universe. But he can't leave, right? Like he can't jump from like the main Marvel universe to the real world by opening a portal. It doesn't work that way. He can only manipulate universal energy back and forth by manipulating time. But because of the fact that that's nothing more than just tapping into existing energy, it's entirely possible for someone like Iron Man to create Infinity Stones, because what he would be doing is basically harnessing the power of time. That's really it. Like if he can make a time machine, he can make a time stone. When it comes to doing something like manipulating the energy of the mind, it's just intercepting or figuring out how the mind works. We already know they did that when it came to the Vision. They literally took all that. Like they basically said the Mind Stone's really nothing more than just a really, really advanced computer system inside of a little stone. That's it. They established that in Age of Ultron. When it comes to something like the Reality Stone, that's when things get a little hairier. But I would imagine it's like tapping into the magic, like literally Stephen Strange, or I'm sorry, Tony Stark sitting down with Wong and just saying like, teach me everything that you taught Doctor Strange about like how the universe works and like universal energy, and then just creating a device that can tap into that energy. That's really all it is. It's just a matter of tapping into a type of energy and nothing more. So I think it's entirely possible for Iron Man to create his own Infinity Stones. Now the question is, will he? Well, I doubt it. I think that'd be too far-fetched. Like I have a hard time believing that like Marvel would make a movie where where like Iron Man would create Infinity Stones. It'd be cool, but like that's never happened. Like nothing like that's ever happened before in Marvel Comics. I think that would really be like uncharted waters. I'd be curious to see how that works. I mean, I would legitimately be curious if let's say that happens. Let's say that like Avengers 4 picks up and Iron Man makes his own Infinity Gauntlet. Like that would actually be pretty beast. Like an Infinity Gauntlet or an Infinity Stone powered Iron Man suit. Could you imagine that? Like that would be, I mean, he'd be God Man is what he would be. Iron God. Like it would be nuts. Like it'd be one of the craziest displays of like technological advancement ever in the history of like Marvel Comics or the movies. I'm kind of curious. Do you guys think Iron Man could create his own Infinity Stones in the Marvel Cinematic Universe? Again, I think it's pretty far-fetched. You know, I can't really envision a circumstance in which this would happen, but that's the point of these theory videos. It's to just like throw whatever kooky idea we have and just like throw it out there and just see how people respond to it. So let me know what you guys think. But with that being said, we're going to bring this video to an end. If you are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Peace.